Hey, I'm 29, and I've been dating my boyfriend, Kyle, 31, for almost 3 years now. We live together, have a cat, and honestly, up until recently, I thought he was the one. The kind of person who'd finally calm all the chaos that came before. He's thoughtful, funny in the quiet kind of way, and he makes this amazing buttermilk grilled cheese that I'm pretty sure cured one of my hangovers once. But the one thing about Kyle I never questioned, never even thought to question, was his past. His family, specifically. Because he told me something early in our relationship that hit me in the gut, that both his parents had passed away. He said it casually, almost too casually, like he didn't want to talk about it but was forcing himself to. Said his dad died of a heart attack when Kyle was 20, and his mom passed a couple years later from cancer. When I asked about siblings, he shook his head and looked away. So, I never pushed. I lost my own mom a few years ago. I know how those questions feel when you're just trying to keep your heart from collapsing. I figured it explained why he never wanted to celebrate holidays much, why he didn't like family photos or share childhood stories. So, for 3 years, I believed that. I believed everything. Until last Sunday. We were out driving, just running boring weekend errands. He was in a weird mood, quiet, distracted. We were passing through this neighborhood a few miles from where we live when suddenly, Kyle slammed on the brakes and pulled over. Said he forgot something at work and needed to go grab it, urgently. Thing is, his job isn't even remotely close to that area. I offered to wait in the car, thinking maybe he was just stressed or forgot some report. But he insisted I go home, said he'd be a while and didn't want to waste my afternoon. His tone was off, kind of sharp, which isn't like him. I didn't argue, I was tired and just wanted coffee. He dropped me off and sped off before I even got to the front door. That's when I got curious. Not suspicious at first, just curious. So I called his work. I've met his boss at a couple of their company BBQs, super nice guy. I asked if Kyle had left something and whether he'd be coming in that day. His boss said no. Kyle wasn't scheduled to work until Tuesday. And no, he hadn't mentioned needing to pick anything up. I felt something cold drop in my stomach. I know how this sounds. I know the obvious assumption would be cheating. And believe me, that was my first thought. But something about it didn't feel like that. Kyle's not the smooth liar type. He's too awkward, too careful. If he were cheating, I'd have seen other signs. Different cologne, late-night texting, hiding his phone. No. This was different. And I couldn't shake this weird detail, the street we stopped on. It looked so familiar. Like I'd been there before. I couldn't place it right away, but hours later, it clicked. My old piano teacher used to live on that block. I pulled up Google Maps and found the exact spot where Kyle had pulled over. Then I scanned the houses. And that's when my heart dropped. One of the houses, 2 doors down from where we parked, had a little garden gnome on the lawn. Dumb, I know. But I'd seen that exact same gnome before. Not in real life. In a photo. A photo Kyle had shown me 2 years ago. He said it was taken outside a family friend's place when he was a kid. He'd only shared it because I'd made a joke about gnomes being creepy, and he pulled up the photo to prove his point. I stared at that Google Street View for what felt like an hour. That gnome. That porch swing. That exact row of rose bushes. It was the same house. And that meant Kyle had lied. About something. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the cat on my chest, staring at the ceiling while my mind tried to untangle 100 thoughts at once. What if it was just a coincidence? What if that gnome was mass-produced and the photo wasn't even from that block? What if I was spiraling for no reason? But deep down, I knew. I knew something wasn't right. And once that seed of doubt is planted, it grows fast. The next morning, I called in sick to work, told them I had a migraine, which wasn't a total lie. My head was pounding from the constant swirl of anxiety and suspicion. Kyle was already gone by then, left a note saying he had to get an early start. No kiss on the forehead, no coffee in the pot like usual. I decided I had to go back to that street. I told myself I'd just drive by. Nothing more. Just look. When I pulled up in front of that same house, I felt my stomach turn. Because parked right there in the driveway, less than 5 feet from the garden gnome, was Kyle's car. Not a car like his. His actual car. Same license plate, same faded sticker in the corner of the back windshield from a beach trip we took last summer. I didn't even know what I was doing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I parked down the block and sat there for 15 minutes, staring at that house like it was going to suddenly explain everything. And then the door opened. A woman stepped out. Older. Gray hair. Thin build. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place why. Then a man came out after her, maybe a few years older than Kyle. They were laughing, talking casually, like they'd just finished breakfast and were heading out for errands. And then, behind them, Kyle, carrying a grocery bag. He leaned down and kissed the woman on the cheek before handing her the bag and walking toward his car. I ducked, heart racing. My brain couldn't keep up. That was his mother. Had to be. I stayed hunched behind the dashboard as he backed out and drove off. He never saw me. But I saw enough to know I hadn't imagined any of this. His mother. Alive. The man? Probably his older brother. Kyle once told me he was an only child. So now I had proof that not only had he lied about his parents being dead, but he also lied about not having siblings. And the weirdest part? The woman didn't look sick. Neither did the man. They looked healthy, happy, normal. There was no funeral. No tragedy. No reason he would have needed to lie. Unless he didn't want me to know they existed. I stayed in the car for another hour, trying to pull myself together. At one point I even cried, quietly, from sheer confusion and hurt. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. Right then I just felt humiliated. Like I'd been dating a stranger this whole time. 3 years. 3 years of holidays too painful to celebrate. 3 years of no family visits because it's just too raw. 3 years of being the understanding girlfriend while he spun this massive lie. And now I had to figure out the one question that mattered more than anything else. Why? I drove home in a daze. The world didn't feel real. The houses, the cars, the radio in the background, it all felt fake, like I'd slipped into some alternate version of my life where nothing made sense anymore. Kyle wasn't home when I got back. I didn't even know where he went after leaving that house. I just sat on the couch, the cat curled next to me, and stared at the front door like he might walk through it any second and somehow explain it all away. I couldn't bring myself to confront him. Not yet. So instead, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went through his stuff. Now before anyone comes at me, I know. But after what I saw that morning, I didn't feel like I owed him blind trust anymore. I started with the hall closet. That's where he kept old boxes and random junk from before we moved in together. Most of it was boring, tools, an old blender, some video game consoles. But then I found a box labeled with masking tape, college stuff. Inside were notebooks, a few beat-up textbooks, photos, and a stack of letters bound with a rubber band. At first I didn't even want to touch them. But curiosity pulled me in. The letters were addressed to someone named Maddie. I'd never heard the name before. And they weren't romantic or anything, at least, not obviously. They were emotional. Raw. Some of them talked about guilt. Regret. One of them started with, "I wish I could come back home, but I know I'm not welcome." They were all signed, Kyle. That's when I started piecing it together. Whatever happened between Kyle and his family, it wasn't that they died, it was that he left. Or was maybe cut off. He hadn't lost them in the tragic way he claimed. He'd either gone no contact or been kicked out. And instead of telling me the truth, he decided to make them dead. I didn't know what was worse, him lying to me, or him fabricating an entire emotional backstory to earn my sympathy. But the name Maddie kept bothering me. It popped up in at least a dozen letters. She was clearly the person he was closest to. The letters to her were longer, more personal. One mentioned how he regretted what he said the night of the wedding. Another said, if I could undo what I did to Maddie, I would. I swear I would. And then I found a photo tucked in between two books. Kyle and a young girl, maybe 13, 14, smiling together on a beach. She was wearing a graduation sash. The back was labeled in pencil, Maddie's 8th grade grad. I stared at that photo for a long time. So now I had new questions, ones I never thought I'd have to ask about the man I lived with. Who is Maddie? Why did Kyle cut off his family? And what exactly did he do that was bad enough to fake their deaths? I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the living room, holding that photo of Kyle and Maddie like it might whisper answers if I stared hard enough. I couldn't get over the smile on his face. He looked genuinely happy, young, relaxed, lighter somehow. The exact opposite of the man who'd always shut down at the mention of family. When Kyle got home that night, I froze. He came in like nothing had happened, humming softly under his breath, keys jingling in his hand. I had the photo tucked under the couch cushion. I didn't say a word. I just watched him go about his routine, feeding the cat, checking the fridge, asking if I wanted dinner. I said no. I couldn't look at him without hearing the words in those letters. If I could undo what I did to Maddie. He eventually noticed I was off, but I brushed it off with a headache excuse. He kissed me on the top of the head like usual and went off to shower. And the second he closed the door behind him, I opened his laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something, anything that would make sense of what I'd found. His email was open. I clicked through the folders. Most of it was work-related or junk. But then I saw a folder titled Archived, and buried deep inside were several unread messages from a Gmail address labeled Maddie V. The most recent one was from a month ago. I opened it. You probably won't respond, but I'll try again. Mom's birthday is next week. She's asking if you're okay. Please just let her know you're alive. That's all I'm asking. I don't care if you hate me. I don't even care if you come. Just give her that. My throat closed up. Not only was Maddie alive, so was his mother. And not only that, but they were trying to reach him. He was the one choosing to stay away. I scrolled further down. Older messages. Heartbreaking ones. Kyle, please. I know what happened was bad, but we're still your family. You don't have to talk to Dad. Just me. Just let me explain. You can't erase what happened by pretending we're dead. I couldn't breathe. All this time I thought he was grieving. Mourning. Healing. But the truth? Kyle was hiding. He chose to cut them off. He let me believe they were dead instead of telling me whatever happened. And worst of all, he knew how much I'd opened up to him about my own grief. He'd seen me cry over my mom's passing. He held me through anniversaries, told me he understood. He didn't. He faked it. He mirrored my grief to cover his lies. I clicked into Maddie's full email address and, without thinking, plugged it into social media. Her profile came up instantly. And when I saw her cover photo, I nearly dropped my phone. It was her, the woman from the beach picture, older now, maybe 20, standing in front of the same house I saw that morning. The house he said no longer existed. She'd posted a caption. Family breakfast before Mom's birthday trip, yellow heart. Sometimes you get a second chance, even if someone doesn't want one. I stared at those words for a long time. And I realized something that chilled me to my bones. They weren't hiding from Kyle. They were waiting for him to stop hiding. And he never did. I barely slept that night. I kept waking up in cold sweats, Kyle breathing steadily beside me like he didn't have a single secret in the world. I kept thinking about Maddie's email. You can't erase what happened by pretending we're dead. That line sat in my chest like a weight. He hadn't just lied, he rewrote reality. Mine, his, ours. And the worst part? I still didn't know what it was. What had he done that was so unforgivable it made him ghost his entire family and bury them in a fabricated tragedy? I needed to know. Not just for myself, but because I couldn't stay in the dark anymore. I couldn't keep loving someone whose entire foundation with me might have been built on rot. So I did something bold. The next morning, after Kyle left for work, I messaged Maddie. I sat there staring at the blinking cursor for 20 minutes, writing and deleting drafts. Finally, I settled on something that didn't sound accusatory or desperate. Hi Maddie. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Kyle's girlfriend. I know this is strange, but I recently found out some things, and I just want to understand. I don't want to cause trouble, I just need the truth. If you're willing to talk, even briefly, I'd be grateful. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. And then I waited. 4 hours. Nothing. By the time Kyle came home that night, I was an emotional wreck. I couldn't even fake normal. Every glance he gave me made my skin crawl. I kept replaying all the moments I'd told him my truths, thinking he was doing the same. But now, all I saw were gaps. Blank spaces filled with rehearsed sympathy. The next morning, I woke up to a new email. From Maddie. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I'm not mad. Just sad. Kyle has told people we're dead before, so I guess I should have expected this day would come eventually. If you want the truth, I'll give it to you. But I need to warn you, it's not pretty. And once you know, you can't unknow it. So think hard before you decide. I read that message 3 times. I was already halfway down the rabbit hole. How could I stop now? I replied simply, I want to know everything. 10 minutes later, her response came. And what she told me. It changed the way I saw Kyle forever. Maddie didn't hold back. Her message came in long paragraphs, no fluff, no small talk, just raw, painful truth. And by the time I got to the end of it, I was shaking. She started by saying she wasn't telling me this to hurt Kyle, but because she believed I deserved the truth. And that maybe, just maybe, if I knew the full story, I'd stop feeling like the crazy one. According to Maddie, everything changed about 5 years ago. Kyle had just finished college and moved back home temporarily. Things were tense between him and their parents, mostly because of money. Kyle had racked up a lot of credit card debt during school, and instead of taking responsibility, he expected his parents to bail him out. At first, they tried. They helped with some bills, co-signed a car loan. But it wasn't enough for him. Then came the turning point. Maddie was 16 at the time and had just started working part-time at a local bookstore to save for college. She kept her savings in a shared desktop folder on the family computer, just a spreadsheet with all her deposits and withdrawal plans. She was proud of it. Their mom even joked that Maddie was more responsible than Kyle. One day, the entire savings account, everything Maddie had worked for, was wiped out. At first, the family thought it was a bank error. Maddie was devastated. They filed a claim, started investigating, and eventually got access to the IP logs. The transactions were traced back to Kyle's laptop. When their parents confronted him, he denied everything. Said someone must have hacked him. But Maddie remembered something. The night before the money disappeared, she caught Kyle on the family computer, claiming he was updating the antivirus. She didn't think anything of it at the time. Eventually, their parents pieced it together. Kyle had transferred Maddie's money into one of his accounts and used it to pay off part of his credit card bill. He stole from his little sister. Their mom was furious. Their dad told him to leave. But the real blow came when Maddie said something that apparently cut too deep. She told Kyle, "You don't need to die. You already killed the version of you that we loved." Kyle packed up and disappeared the next day. And over time, he stopped responding to calls. He never apologized. Never even acknowledged what he did. Instead, Maddie said, he started telling people that his family had died. She knew because an old friend from high school messaged her one day, confused after running into Kyle and hearing that both his parents had passed. Maddie ended her email with this: "I don't know what kind of person he is now. Maybe he changed. Maybe you changed him. But if he's still lying to you the way he lied to us, then I needed you to see it. Not out of spite, but so you don't wake up one day and realize you've been living inside someone else's fiction. I'm sorry. I really am." I sat there for a long time, unable to breathe. That's when it clicked. The way Kyle would flinch whenever I brought up money. How he insisted on handling our rent transfers. How he once freaked out when I asked to check our shared account to pay a bill. I thought it was just pride. Maybe a little financial insecurity. But now I wasn't so sure. I wasn't even sure who I'd been sharing a bed with for the past 3 years. After reading Maddie's message, I just sat there for what felt like hours. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. The cat kept pawing at my leg like it could sense something was wrong. And something was very wrong. Because now I couldn't stop thinking about our money. For the past year, Kyle had insisted on streamlining our bills. He said it would make things easier if all our shared expenses came out of one account, his account. I still had access, technically, but he handled all the actual payments, rent, utilities, subscriptions. I'd just Venmo him my half every month, and he'd take care of the rest. I never questioned it. Not until now. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank account we shared. The same one I hadn't looked at in over 6 months. I'd trusted him. I was always the emotional half in this relationship, and he was the steady one. Or so I thought. What I saw made my stomach flip. There were regular withdrawals that didn't line up with any bills. Not a few. Dozens. $180 here, $60 there, $400 in one go. And they weren't labeled anything specific, just generic descriptions like online services or recurring transfer. But the kicker? These weren't monthly charges. They were weekly. Sometimes daily. I kept digging. That's when I found it. A PayPal account connected to our shared bank. I hadn't even known he used PayPal. And when I went through the statement, my blood went cold. Gaming sites. Crypto wallets. Online sports betting. Thousands of dollars, our dollars, gone. I searched the email tied to the PayPal. It was one I didn't recognize, but the recovery email? His personal one. The same one he'd used for everything since we moved in together. I felt sick. I thought I was looking at a guy who'd lied about his past, but it was worse. I was looking at a guy who never stopped lying. He didn't steal just once from a teenage sister years ago, he was doing it again. Only now it was from me. My savings. My rent money. Every Venmo transfer I'd trusted him with, it had become his personal gambling fund. And the scariest part? I would have never known if I hadn't checked. If Maddie hadn't told me the truth, I might have gone on another year, 2 years, maybe married him. I would have handed my life to someone who burned bridges and buried the ashes behind sweet smiles and sad stories. That night, I didn't wait for him to get home. I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, my important documents, and the cat. I left him a single note on the fridge, 6 words, written in a hand that didn't feel like mine. I know everything. Do not follow. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. I stayed at a friend's place that night. Lena, the one person I knew wouldn't ask too many questions. She gave me her spare key, made tea, and left me alone, which was exactly what I needed. I spent the whole night scrolling through transactions, cross-checking every dollar I'd ever sent Kyle. I felt like I was doing an autopsy on a relationship I hadn't even realized was dead. The next morning, the messages started. 17 texts, 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't ready to hear his voice. But then one of the texts popped up on my lock screen, and it stopped me cold. Please don't do this. It's not what you think. Classic. But what came next? That was the twist I didn't expect. I never gambled your money. I swear. I was paying someone off. Now I was curious. I opened the full message thread. It was a mess of desperation and deflection. Just talk to me. Please. It's not about you. It was from before we met. It followed me here. If you go to my family, it'll get worse. That last one made me pause. Worse? Worse than pretending your family's dead? Worse than draining our account and lying to my face for 3 years? I decided I needed to hear what excuse he'd come up with next, so I texted back. Tell me the truth. In one message. No lies. No pity. If I even feel a whiff of BS, I'm blocking you forever. He replied within 2 minutes. Maddie doesn't know the full story. She never did. I didn't just take her money. I borrowed it to keep someone quiet. There was a girl I hooked up with in college. She said she was pregnant. I freaked out. She threatened to go to my parents. I didn't want to ruin things with my dad. He was already fed up with me. So I took Maddie's savings, paid the girl to disappear. She wasn't even pregnant. It was a lie. But when my parents found out, they didn't care. They said I was manipulative, toxic. My mom called me a sociopath. They kicked me out. Maddie turned on me too. That's when I left. It wasn't about money. It was about shame. I just stared at the screen. I couldn't tell if he was finally being honest or if this was just another mask, another layer of manipulation. But what stood out to me wasn't even the pregnancy part, it was what he said about his family. They said I was manipulative, toxic. He never denied it, just repeated it like he wanted me to feel sorry for him. But I didn't. Because none of that explained why he kept lying. Why he told me his mom died of cancer. Why he pretended to grieve holidays that he never actually lost. Why he watched me cry about my own mother, and met me in that grief with fiction. Whatever happened in his past, he chose to carry it forward into our present. And that was something I couldn't forgive. I didn't reply to his message. Not because I didn't have 100 things I wanted to say, but because none of it mattered anymore. His explanation, even if it was true, didn't change what he'd done to me. It didn't make the lies go away. It didn't give me back the 3 years I'd spent loving someone who didn't really exist. I stayed quiet. And that silence must have scared him, because 2 days later, Kyle showed up at Lena's place. I don't even know how he found out I was there. Maybe I slipped up somehow, left a charger out at home with a label, or maybe he just guessed. He knocked like he had every right in the world to be there. I watched from the kitchen window as he stood outside, shoulders slumped like he was the victim in all this. Lena looked at me and asked if I wanted her to call the cops. I said no, I'd handle it. I opened the door and stepped outside, leaving it halfway closed behind me. Kyle looked surprised, like he didn't expect I'd even speak to him. He started talking fast, apologies, excuses, emotional confessions, the whole performance. He said he hadn't slept, that he missed me, that he was ready to be honest now. He said we could go to therapy. That he'd explain everything, fix everything. Then he said the words that chilled me. If you tell Maddie I've been gambling again, she'll make it worse. I'm begging you, don't talk to her anymore. That's when I knew. It wasn't just about shame. It was control. Kyle wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid I'd burn the only bridges he hadn't already torched. I told him I didn't care about his relationship with Maddie. I told him I'd already forwarded everything, his PayPal records, the transfers, the screenshots of his excuses, to a secure folder on my cloud. That if anything happened to me, the whole thing would go public. He went quiet. His whole body language shifted. He didn't get angry, he just looked blank. Like the act was over and he didn't need to pretend anymore. Then, as calm as ever, he said, "You're really going to throw this all away over a little money and a few lies?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back inside and closed the door in his face. He didn't knock again. But I watched from the window as he stood there for a few more seconds, expressionless, before walking away like none of it mattered. Like 3 years of memories were just disposable. It took me a few days to breathe again. To feel like the air in my lungs actually belonged to me. Kyle didn't come back. He didn't call, didn't text. It was like he vanished, and for the first time, I wasn't panicked by that, I was relieved. But then, on the 5th day after that last confrontation, Lena got home from work and handed me something. It was a small padded envelope. No return address. No postage. Just my name written in that exact scrawly half-print Kyle used on grocery lists and birthday cards. He'd dropped it off while we were gone. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a folded piece of paper. The note was short. "This is everything. If you still think I'm beyond saving after this, I won't bother you again." For a second, I almost didn't plug it in. I didn't want to give him one more second of my attention. But something told me I needed to see it. The drive held one folder. Inside were two things, a Word doc labeled Truth and a video file. I opened the document first. It was a confession. Page after page of him writing out the story, not just the money, not just Maddie, but everything. The lies. The fake grief. The version of himself he'd built because, in his words, it was easier to be pitied than hated. He admitted he'd lied about his parents being dead because he couldn't handle explaining why they'd cut him off. Said he got good at sympathy. Said people treated him gentler when they thought he'd suffered. He talked about Maddie with something that almost resembled guilt. Said she was the only person who ever really saw through him, which is why he resented her more than anyone. But what stood out to me, what made my chest tighten, was the part where he said, "When I met you, I thought I could be better. I thought I could leave that part of me behind. But lies are like weeds. They come back unless you pull out the root. I never pulled mine." I read it twice. 3 times. Then I opened the video file. It was a screen recording. Kyle, talking directly into the webcam. No edits. No script. He looked wrecked. Not in the polished, performative way he had when he wanted sympathy. This was raw. Puffy eyes. Long pauses. He didn't cry, but he looked like he'd been crying for days. He said he never meant to hurt me. That he really did love me. But that love couldn't fix what was wrong inside him. He ended with one line I'll never forget. "You deserved a real person. Not a curated tragedy." And then it cut out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the black screen, trying to remember the version of myself from 3 years ago, the one who'd fallen in love with him in the first place. That version of me didn't exist anymore. I'd mourned a relationship built on fiction. I'd been lied to with precision. But I'd also made it out. With my sanity, with my instincts sharpened, and with no more illusions about what love looks like. It doesn't look like grief for people who are still alive. It doesn't sound like silence when the truth is begging to be told. And it sure as hell doesn't feel like walking on eggshells while someone controls the narrative of your life. I deleted the video. I archived the document. I put the flash drive back in the envelope and locked it in a drawer, just in case I ever forget why I left. But honestly, I don't think I ever will. Update: 6 weeks later I got a message from Maddie last week. She just said, "Thank you for walking away. You did what the rest of us couldn't." That meant more than I can explain. Kyle hasn't reached out since. And if he does, he'll be met with silence. Because I've finally started building a life that doesn't revolve around other people's broken pieces. And for the first time in years, that life is mine.